Boom. That's my Siri. It's the same voice as Siri, Randy.
It sounds good, man. That sounds excellent.
Hey,
You're a business. Yeah.
You're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. For those who don't know, I'm Teddy and that's Randy. And our special guest today is Sam Wong. It's going to be a great conversation today. We'll talk about startups and stock options and, risk assessments and risk mitigation and all about, how do you look at that world of startups when you're in career search and maybe wanting to start a startup. So anyway, for those who don't know, I'm Teddy Burriss. I work for Burriss Consulting. That would be my wife. And we teach LinkedIn as a business tool. We teach Sales Navigator. We're also now teaching Google Workspace and Gmail. Been using it for 15 years. Thought, you know what? People keep asking me questions. I'm going to make a living doing this. So I love helping people who want to get more value out of those business tools in my webinars, one-on-one coaching, corporate training, online classes. Randy, would you tell the good folks who the heck you are, buddy?
Teddy, we only have an hour, man. What else are you into? Hey, first of all, welcome back, my friend. I'm glad you came back safely, and I hope you'll share briefly some of your adventures with our attendees today. So my name is Randy Wooden. And for those that may not be aware, I am the director for Goodwill's Professional Center here at Goodwill Industries, Northwest North Carolina. And we still believe it's the first, and we think still the only standalone professional center for any Goodwill in the country. We help folks typically who are on this call, who are professionals and maybe between jobs or, proactively looking. So look me up on LinkedIn. Services are free. We work by appointment. It's all virtual. So I don't care where you're located. I'm happy to try to help you. And one of the things that I love about my job, and even though this isn't part of my job, it kind of is, because we help job hunters. And that's a hookup with Teddy. Teddy, by the way, before I throw it back to you, if you're watching us, let us know where you're watching from. And also, what did you have for lunch? And if you have comments or questions for Sam, put them in the chat box. I don't monitor Q&A. Because I don't have to. Remember that? It's in my contract, Teddy, just so you know. But let us know where you're watching us from.
You want to do, right?
Yeah, when I feel like it. How does that sound? But and I'll work them into the conversation where appropriate. So we'd like to hear your comments, questions for Sam. We've got a great topic. So Teddy, let me throw it back to you. Let's get this started.
Yeah, absolutely. So I met Sam through one of the other organizations on the West Coast. I'm trying to remember the name of the group. The ladies, was it Vinny that introduced us? ProMatch.
It's ProMatch. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, Vinny said, dude, you got to talk to Sam. He's helped us at ProMatch, bring some really good conversations. So Sam and I chatted and said, you know what, this sounds like a really good idea. And so, I met Sam. Sam's a CEO coach, and he does startup training and helping organizations build their startup, move it from ideation to becoming healthy, to getting funded, to thriving. Sam's been involved in about 5+ startups at different levels. And when we talked about it, it was like, man, there's so much aligning with creating a startup and with people joining startups as employees in one context, that we thought, you know what, this would be a great conversation. Mm-hmm. So Sam, do me a favor, buddy, introduce yourself to folks a little bit better than I did, and we'll get started with the conversation.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for the time. Happy to be able to help out. So as Teddy had mentioned, I have done 5 startups. I run a company now called Fundable Startups. It's fundablestartups.com. I spend a lot of time with startup founders. So there's lots of people who have the entrepreneurial spirit. I greatly encourage it. I think a startup is one of the best places to be, but you have to kind of go into it with the right expectations, because not all of them are like Hollywood. Not all startups go, become unicorns. Not all of them IPO, and not everybody buys McMansions afterwards. Okay.
Oh man, Teddy told me if only no. Hey, Sam, thanks again for joining us. It's going to be fun today. Again, if you've got comments or questions for Sam, please put them in the chat box. And Teddy, if I may, I always like to start with the opening question, and that is why. What drove you, Sam? What's the why behind the passion for what you do? What kind of got you started on this path? Because what you do takes a pretty strong stomach. I mean, it really does, and it does, to be able, because so many people, a lot of my clients, they say, look, I'm adverse to the risk, the unknown. I want a corporate job, for better or worse. That's what I want, but not you. And you've gone a different path. What's the why behind what you do?
Well, one for me is that I love the opportunities in a startup company. Yes, there is some risk. Yes, it is challenging because there's less infrastructure and all those things. But I love the fact that you're not pigeonholed into one spot. For me, I never found myself defined by you are this, you can only do this. And I found that in my first job out of college, I was at a large corporation, Hewlett Packard, tens of thousands of people all over the world. And at my most recent job before I left, I was at Cisco, another large organization. Cisco acquired startup number 5. And Cisco is one of the best places to work, I think, as large companies go, but I'm just not a large company guy, because I found that I had to develop a skill which I did not enjoy, which was lobbying. I was not a K Street lobbyist in Washington, D.C. That is not my, that's not my cup of tea. And I found that I just could get a lot more done. And even if things didn't go well, like the first 2 startups shut down, I learned a ton. I wish I had learned it before and not kind of fallen down, skinned my knee, broke my arm, whatever. Yeah. I wish the car didn't end up in a ditch, so to speak. But still, I learned a ton. And some of those lessons learned helped me to be able to make startups 3, 4, and 5 just go much better.
You make an interesting point, Sam, about, in some ways you wish you had, if I only knew now what I didn't know then, or whatever that country song goes by. But many of my clients who have maybe owned a franchise, that kind of a thing. And even if it didn't work out, nobody has ever said back to me, hey, I wish I had never done that, because they learned so much about not just business, but about themselves.
Absolutely.
A lot about themselves. And so I'll throw it back to Teddy, because he's driving the bus today. So Teddy, take it away. But I had to get that out. Always curious about what motivates folks. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Cool stuff. So Sam, I've been there. I've not created my own startups beyond the one that I'm driving right now, that allows me to buy the McMansions I want to buy and have all the limos I want to have. And I squander money away left and right on, wine, women, and cars in my mind. But I've done work for startups. And so let's talk about that for a little bit in the context of as an employee, as someone looking at opportunities. What would be some of the ideas you have about why someone should consider going to work for a startup?
Well, I have had people say that working at a startup is better than getting an MBA. MBAs are fantastic. You got to respect people who've done that. But it is a classroom environment. And in a startup company, you are in the trenches. Bullets are flying. It's live fire everywhere. And it is challenging, but it's one of the best experiences and best opportunities to really grow your skills. I think most people rise to the level of challenge they face. Now, it is important to make sure that you understand how tall that challenge is. All right. I don't swim very well, but I do enjoy getting on a boogie board and trying to catch a little 2-foot or 3-foot wave. If I'm gonna face one of those big wave, surfer guys, 20, 25-foot waves, not for me. So you just got to make sure that you know what you're built for. All right. And that you choose the right place to be able to surf, so to speak. I do think, though, that, like you said, even if things don't work out, one of the things that I do talk about in my startup, I have a topic that I give every now and then to people who are job search groups, et cetera, is that what do you do if the startup fails? Well, you can think of it as gambling and lost, that's kind of the negative side. But the positive side of that is you invested and you're more capable. So the next role that you'll have, you probably have more talent and skill to be able to bring to that role.
Yeah, I get that. And I remember those days. One of my first startups was a $500 million roll up, 26 organizations into one. And I'm absolutely aligned with that. You know, it was better than an MBA because I mean, I got to work with 26 business owners and hear all these different perspectives and ideas. And then work with the CEO of this, and the chairman of the board of this roll up. And you're right. I mean, bullets were firing left and right, and challenges were coming at us left and right. And it was overwhelming, but the experience is one that you can't get in a classroom. The knowledge you can't get in a classroom. Yeah. So, but it's not for the faint of heart. I mean, it is, besides the risk, you got to be willing to manage the blood pressure in that environment. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And another thing I do talk about with folks, because I do get a lot of questions from people who are thinking, hey, I have this idea, I have this startup, I have, this desire to be an entrepreneur and stuff. That's all great. I didn't realize how much I needed great infrastructure around me, starting with my wife. Okay. So when I was working all those crazy hours and such, I needed to make sure I had a great family support system, that when, I've cooked myself because I, had a deadline, that I had time to, in an environment where I could kind of just recuperate a little bit and had the support of my family. The other thing that beyond just my wife, because sometimes all the strife and pressure of the startup I'd bring home with me, and I'd start a fight with my wife, not intentionally. Okay.
Yeah.
So I
don't know what you're talking about. No, I do. I can picture that. Yeah, absolutely. So having a good, a well-structured family life and a support system around you, and a tolerant wife and tolerant kids is a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in, and maybe you can touch on this, if not right now, maybe later, but what are some of you talk about, the car going in the ditch and that thing, and you learn as you go, but what are some things that are common themes for when a startup doesn't work out? For example, you don't have the support of your spouse, or the money is lack of a sufficient ramp up funding, or there may be a checklist. And I know we'll get into some of that later, but I am kind of curious because that whole home life piece of this is key. Because what is that? Happy wife, happy life. Is that how that goes? Yeah. So there you go. Let me see what other cliches I can come up with. I'll get to work on that one, Teddy.
Yeah. So we'll play at that a little bit more as we move forward. But there's another piece of this too, is a lot of people think of going to work for a startup is I got to do a certain amount of work before payday. I got to do a certain amount of work before I can cash in on those stock options. I got to be a certain amount of work before I become a partner or whatever. But there's more to it than that. There's a life cycle involved in, the creation and the development of a startup. And as an employee or as a potential employee, you have to understand that. Do you want to speak a little bit about that life cycle of that? And it's not this.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe the one way to look at it is in the same way when you're raising a kid, that kid goes through stages in life, from infant to toddler, tweenie, to, maybe preteen to teen to etc. They have different needs. Okay. And you have to understand, where is the startup in that journey? Okay, are they very, very early newborn, or are they premature newborn, or whatever the case may be? Or are they, in the early crawler stage, and you're going to be changing 10, 12 diapers a day or something like that? You got to understand where they're at. Okay. And there's lots of elements of that startup journey. And what I tried to do is I end up probably it's best described in a visual. So I created something, an infographic. It's a startup execution roadmap, and it's a high level just graphic that shows the typical journey of a healthy startup. There are some unhealthy startups that kind of do the loop instead of, even if you don't go in a perfectly straight line, as long as you're not doing too many loops, okay. But I did create this document, this asset. It's on my website, fundablestartups.com. I created it to help people get a high level view of what the journey should look like, from formation to idea validation to model validation, the entire journey from basically founding to exit. Okay.
Yeah.
So understand where the startup is at, and that there are certain things to be able to look for. And it's not only about how much of the product is built or how much money has been raised or what the founders tell you they've done, which may not always actually be true of what they think they've done may not actually be what they have done. Okay. So there's lots of elements to that, but I like to use the roadmap to be able to visually identify where are people truly.
Yeah. I wonder to what extent an employee or a potential employee's belief and or support of the product is worthwhile or relevant when you're considering a job offer.
Well, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
And their belief in their product, their mission, their vision, whatever it is they're doing, it certainly doesn't hurt. That belief system is oftentimes somewhat indicative of a couple of important startup characteristics. One might be grit. Okay. Another might be the ability to sell. So just because you believe you have a great product, if I tell you, hey, you hungry? Let's go to lunch. We're going to go get cold, dead fish. Well, if somebody else comes and says, well, hey, let's go get some sushi. It's a very different invitation. Okay. So I think it's very, very important to even see that how well does this founder or this startup employee sell what they do, because selling is one of the many skills that someone needs. It's been said before that in any company, everyone sells.
Yeah.
Sure. When the company's super small, that old adage could not be more true. If that guy who's trying to lure you into his company can't sell you as a potential future employee on the idea, then how good are they at selling customers who will eventually pay them? Okay. Yeah. So I've seen a lot of startup founders have a great product that they couldn't sell because they had no sales skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't know how to sell cold, dead fish and make a living at it, then you shouldn't be in that business.
That's something too, Sam, that, occasionally I'll get people that come to me and they say, yeah, I may be open to starting my own business. And a great example are IT guys, fix-it guys, right? I'm going to start a small business where I'm going to go out and be the de facto IT, department for tiny companies. Problem is they're IT guys. They're not salespeople. And for them to be able to sell and market their service, that's very intimidating. And so whether they go into business with somebody else who can sell it, whatever, and let them do the service work. But those are all things to think about. So I'm glad that was brought up, because that is a stumbling block. Hey, I've got a great idea, but I got to be able to go out and sell it to the public. And also, if I need a partner, I need to bring somebody in. I got to sell them on the idea too.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, if we're all here old enough to remember the VHS versus beta wars back in the 1970s.
Teddy sure is. Teddy's he's old.
That was a gamble I screwed up on, Sam.
Yeah. But the lesson from that story way back when was better marketing beats better technology all day long. Okay, so Betamax was the better videotape format, but VHS won the day because they just had better marketing, better relationships, all that stuff. So there's tons of examples of that over the years. You can have a great product, but if you tell very few people or you tell it poorly, you'll lose to someone who has a good enough product and they tell everyone.
Yeah. I wonder if I could get Walmart and CVS and Walgreens and all the grocery stores to hang a CD up on their light pole beside their cash registers for me.
CD, huh?
Remember that? AOL and Netscape?
Sure.
They gave
Now,
them
now you
away
mention
for
it.
free, you know? So yeah, I'm with you. All right, so Sam, look, so some of these folks are looking for jobs or looking for career transition. You know, they have another idea about getting out of the cubicle they're in now, and they're thinking about, you know, having a conversation with a startup. So they get this fantastic job offer.
Sure.
What are some of the components that you should look for, and or what are some components of a job offer from a startup that you should be cautious about?
Sure. So your offer letter will usually have a couple things. My assumption is that the startup's far enough along that they actually have an offer template. The offer letter, of course, will have your salary. All right. It should have, and it's traditional, just about every startup will offer some type of stock option grant. Okay. And those are the two key things that everybody tends to look at. I think most people understand the cash side of it. That typical salary for a startup, depending on where they're at, it's going to be below market, quite likely. Okay. Well, if they're paying market salaries, they're either not really in startup stage anymore, they're big company stage or almost big company, or they're mismanaging their money, which I've seen startups do as well. Okay. That's just the unfortunate truth that startup salaries tend to be below market, anywhere from 10% to 90% below market, depending on where you're coming from. Okay, some of them don't even pay a minimum wage, which obviously is a labor law issue, but that's another story. Okay. The other component, though, is more mysterious, and that's the stock options. What the stock option, what the letter will usually say is, you will be granted, subject to board approval, blah, 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 all the legalese, X number of options, 10,000 options, 100,000 options, or whatever. And the average person says, 10,000, that doesn't feel like a lot, okay? But if it says 100,000, I'm feeling better about that. Yeah. Don't get faked out by the number of options. You need to focus more on the percentage that those options represent of the company. What percentage of the company would that be? Because in essence, I could say, I'm giving you, hey, Teddy or Randy, I'm giving you 2 slices of my pie, and Randy, I'm going to give you 3 slices of the pie, okay, or the pizza or whatever. You may feel great about that and such, but the real question is, how many slices did I cut the pie into? Okay. If I cut it into 4 slices, then you guys are doing pretty good, or 5 slices, whatever. But if there's 1 million slices, you're not going to get full. Okay. So it's important to understand the percentage, and they usually don't tell you. Okay. And part of that is some desire to be secretive, etc. Another is the fact that it's actually not easy to calculate that number. You would think it is, but it's not easy to stay on top of that. Okay. And there's lots of reasons for that. There's lots of technical issues, but the bottom line is they could give you an approximation that they can do, but they usually don't give it unless you ask. And sometimes when you ask, they don't answer. And it's kind of like saying, gosh, you guys have seen all the cryptocurrency craze nowadays.
Sure.
Randy, you're selling me your car. I'm going to pay you in Sam coins.
You think you are? That's it. It is interesting because you're right. You ought to remember the old Yogi Berra, how many slices of pizza do you want? And he says, he goes 3 or whatever, but it was, I don't think I can eat 4. But again, it was depending how many slices were in the pizza. It's an old joke and it's a yogiism that I can't remember right now. But I like what you're saying about this because 10,000 doesn't sound like 100,000, but you would think that there's some kind of roadmap. Now, I'm not going to claim to be an expert because I watch Shark Tank from time to time, but you get on here and you hear about valuation of company and where they are in the process. And I would just have assumed incorrectly that this stuff is front and center, because if you're asking me to go to war with you and come on, and join the team and have a piece of the action, I need to have a clear understanding of how big that piece is. And you're telling me that that's still kind of shady. I still can't really.
It's kind of opaque. Okay. Some founders will just tell you, oh, that
Really?
100,000 shares that I'm offering you, that's 0.1% or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Others will kind of try to dodge the issue. It's kind of weird because if literally you were going to accept my offer of, Sam coins for your car, your first question back is going to, well, how much is a Sam coin worth right now? Okay.
Yeah.
And if I don't tell you, okay, then you can't assess the quality
Yeah.
of my job offer. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a little bit funky, but you should try to ascertain that. And there are lots of resources on the internet that give some, rough guidance. If you're at this job title and the startup is this far along, the earlier that you are in the startup, the bigger the slice of the pie you should get. That's common sense logic type stuff. And there are resources out there because, literally there's tons of different roles, tons of different levels. And depending on what role you play at what startup, at, how senior you are, that's going to ultimately determine the slice of the pie.
And there's another piece of that, Sam, that I only know from personal experience. I went to work for 2 startups and got huge numbers of stock options. But there's other part about it as well, depending upon your level in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
If you're an executive level, then you're at the mercy of the stock laws, whatever the heck they are, as to when or if you can cash in your options. At some
yes, that is correct. Most people do not have a stock option exercise strategy, a stock option strategy. That is a niche area of financial advice. Okay. Very few financial advisors are skilled in knowing how to put that together.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's say you accept the job offer and you've got your 100,000 options, et cetera. And they usually have a vesting cycle, which means the first year, the standard vesting cycle is a 4-year vesting cycle. First year, if you leave before your 1-year anniversary, you get to keep zero. None of your stock options. There's a 1-year cliff. And then it vests linearly from, 1 day or each month thereafter, after your 13th, 14th, 15th month, et cetera. So that's a standard vesting cycle. As you vest, you should be eligible in most stock option plans to potentially exercise the stock option early. Yeah. When you exercise the stock option, that means, let's say you got 100,000 stock options and the stock option strike price was $1 per share. Mm-hmm. So at exactly 12 months time, I will vested 25%. If I wanted to, I could exercise 25,000 stock options, okay, in early exercise, which means I'd have to pay the exercise price, $1 times 25,000 shares. I'd have to write a check to the company for $25,000. Mm-hmm. Why would someone do that? Well, if you see the company, if you really are confident that the company is going somewhere and those options are going to be worth something, it might be worth the risk, because then you own the stock option as of that day, and you start the clock for capital gains. Okay, yeah. Capital gains treatment on your taxes. So there's lots of low-level details about that. It gets a lot more complicated. I don't think a whole lot of people exercise early, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. So this is not obviously financial advice. Sure. Because if you exercise early and the company tanks and shuts down, you just lost $25,000.
Yep. Yeah, I remember those days. It's an ugly story that for another day. So there's lots of, and by the way, there's probably lots of other things that we need to pay attention to in that offer letter. I mean, it's one thing to talk about the salary and stock options, but what else is that startup going to be doing, or what else are they capable of doing for you? Are they going to support your professional development? Are you going to get time off with family? Are you going to get, benefits, insurance and healthcare, and, besides the stock option, are they also going to, support you with a 401k of some nature? So sure. Often we get, glitter in our eyes about stock options, and we forget all those other really important components of a good offer. So
that's right. And in today's day and age, as long as the startup has gotten to a certain point in time, they usually have at least medical benefits of some sort. It may not be a very rich plan. Okay. The very early stage startups usually do not have any type of retirement plan, no 401k or anything like that. So benefits tend to be a little weak, even if they do offer medical benefit coverage. tends to be some type of low cost plan to keep their expenses low. All right. So you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, it's 12:30. You're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy, and our special guest today is Sam Wong. And the conversation is all about employees going to work or considering job opportunities from startups and all the different components that were associated with that. Randy and I are doing this show. This is, I think, show 81 or 82. Appreciate everyone who shows up and all who watch us on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook and download our podcast. We want to keep doing this show. We're looking for more sponsors to help us grow it, because we do this to help you. So Sam, thanks a lot for joining us today. Good dialogue right now. You brought back lots of horror stories and and stress that I had back in 2000 when I worked for a company that offered me the moon as an executive for their startup.
So I'm enriching your therapist. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. Actually, you're reminding me that in one context, I was better off not executing on some of those stock options that I had, because the company went bankrupt within 3 months.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at the financial equation, the reality is, if you've got some years of experience and you're at a nice, comfortable corporate job, you probably have a decent salary. And that's going to be guaranteed as long as, if most large corporations aren't going to die the next day. Okay. And it's usually guaranteed as long as, the corporation is healthy. So as long as you work there for the next 4 years, you probably have a good idea of what your income's going to be, and it's reasonably stable. You have to evaluate, I have reasonable certainty that I'm going to get my salary. Let's say you're paid $100,000 or whatever. So in 4 years, you'll probably get paid $400,000. That's reasonably certain. Should you leave that job, take a job at a startup paying $60,000, giving up $40,000 every year, and for whatever number of stock options they're going to give you, you have to kind of just do the math and say, well, I'm giving up this amount of salary. That's my lost opportunity in the salary times 4. I'm gambling effectively over 4 years, $160,000. Is that a good gamble, a good bet to make, hoping that the stock options will pay me back at some point in the future?
Yeah. And there's another component to look at too, because some of the folks on here don't have jobs today, so they're not giving up that 100,000. So they're looking for a job. Most of them are going to look for that $100,000 job to replace the one they lost, just using numbers for conversation. But they shouldn't turn down the evaluation of taking a $60,000 a year job with a startup that they trust the leaders to grow. They believe it'll grow. Take that risk. It's way better than waiting for the $100,000 job. Maybe. You got to do the research. I tell people every day, do the research, understand where the company is, where they're going, who's there to take and lead them there, and do you believe it'll happen?
Yeah. So a lot of times working in a startup presents great opportunities. So Bobby Unser said way back when that success is where preparation and opportunity meet. Okay. Those are 2 necessary components to be successful. There's some people who tripped and fell, didn't really do a lot of preparation, but they were at the right time, right place. Okay. And they, maybe they worked for an amazing company that just shot to the moon, and now they're financially successful. Yeah. They just had a great opportunity. Wasn't necessarily because they really prepared themselves for that. But if you have done the preparation, you believe that, man, I just want to get in the game, coach. I've been riding the bench all this time. I've been, at the end, put me in, coach, put me in. Well, if you join a startup, you're going to get tons of opportunities. And that's one of the biggest differentiators between a startup and a large corporation, is that the typical large corporation opportunities are few and far between. Your opportunity for a promotion is usually tied to when the person above you quits, gets promoted themselves, or dies. Okay. So unless you want to hire a hitman, which is, not recommended.
Now you tell me.
Yeah.
So Sam,
the opportunities are great though.
When we look at startups, and let's go back to the stock conversation just for a few more minutes here. There's different types of stock options. There's different types of stocks that they'll offer you. Break that up. I know that's common and preferred, and there's probably some other variations. So share with us a little bit about that.
So fundamentally, there are two major types of stock. There are little esoteric things that are corner case things, but we'll not talk about that right now unless somebody asks a question. Common and preferred. Okay. Preferred stock is what an investor will get when they write a check to say a venture capitalist, drops $1 million or whatever into the startup. They get preferred stock. And the difference between preferred and common is that the preferred stock has additional rights that the common stock doesn't. The average employee will get common stock options. Okay. Usually not common stock itself. It's options to buy stock at the future. Okay. Again, there are other corner case variants of this, but we're talking like 97%, 98% of startups will do it this way. So common stock should be priced lower per share than preferred stock. And that's important because a lot of founders at a startup, they don't know this and they do not pay attention to what they're doing to their common stock price. The stock price of each share of common stock affects the strike price of the stock options. Okay. So that common stock should be given just like any asset, there should be a fair market value assigned to it. And there's a process that the IRS has that the IRS determines is acceptable to determine what that fair market value is. And that fair market value should be your strike price when you're granted the options. If they don't manage that the right way, and they just willy-nilly say, I think the share price should be this, and they just pick a number out of thin air, and they get it wrong, that number deviates from fair market value. If it comes in too high, meaning the true fair market value of the stock is say $1 a share, and they say, well, our stock should be $2, so they double the amount. Effectively, that will cut in half. Well, it will not cut in half. It will affect your upside later because your strike price will be $2 instead of $1. So later, if the company does get acquired or IPO, you make less money. But if they, put it too low, which is probably more common, what that means is if it's really a $1 a share value, fair market value, and they offer it to you at 10 cents a share, then you got a 90-cent per share benefit, which the IRS considers taxable income. Okay, so you might get surprised with a tax bill if you get audited or things like that. How often does that happen? Not that often, but still, it can bite you in the backside, bite you in the wallet.
Yeah. So understanding that, or at least understand the primary components of what that all means, makes a big difference when you're planning this, going to work for the startup. So then there's another really big piece of this, Sam, and that is, do you believe, and have you done the research that the startup can actually be successful? I would wager that a lot of people don't really invest a lot of time evaluating, can this really be successful? What have you discovered?
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to get a yardstick that measures the likelihood of a startup success. Okay, there is no simple metric. Hey, stand on the scale. Are you overweight or not for your height? Okay, it's not that simple. Okay, so most people don't know what to do. They go by subjective things, like how enthusiastic is the founder? What good news does he share about the situation, or he or she? Yeah, those are helpful, but those are not good objective metrics. There are ways to be able to evaluate a startup more objectively. Okay, one of the most common things that causes a startup to fail is premature scaling. What is that? Okay, it means that the founders of the startup, or the people running the startup, overbuilt the company before they got over their skis, basically. Before they were really ready. So either they hired too much, spent too much money, or overbuilt the product before they had the sales to justify it, whatever the case may be. It's one of the most common things. So the antidote for premature scaling is validation. And what that means is that the founders should validate their idea first. Then once they've done that, they should validate the business model. The idea may be good, but the second part of it is, can you make money selling the idea? Will people buy it at a price that you want to sell it for? And will that price sustain the operations and help you generate a comfortable profit for all of the risk? So understanding that validation process is difficult because most startup founders don't even do it well. Okay. It's a hard thing to do. Okay. But if I would encourage people to, if you're really trying to assess a startup, maybe do a little bit of research, read up on validation, idea validation. There's a book called The Lean Startup that is written by a guy named Eric Ries. He has some good tips about how to be able to validate. There's some people who just describe what it looks like when you have a validated environment, validated startup, validated idea. Mm-hmm. I think just saying, well, when you arrive at New York City, you'll see lots of tall buildings. I'm sorry, I'm not in New York City right now. It's nice to know that what it will look like when I get there, but I need to know how to get there. What's the validation mm-hmm. path? So I need a Google Maps GPS to get there. And, that's what a lot of guys like me, startup coaches end up spending time helping founders to try to do, is help them to be able to build their roadmap to the destination they want to be. So in essence, just validate.
I remember the last startup I went to work for, and it was in Las Vegas, Nevada. And Randy, one of these days, I'll tell you what business I was in Las Vegas, Nevada. And, but okay. I went to work for this startup and I did research on the founder. Mm-hmm. I did research on the executive team. I went and looked for them all over the internet, and I found them. I found the things they did. I found the successes they had and the failures they had.
Sure.
By going looking at the startups they were involved in before. And then I was fortunate to work out of the corporate office. I was fortunate to hear the arguments that were going on about how this business was growing or not growing. And I listened to those. And that for me was really telling when I heard resonating support, or I heard resonating lack of support across the management team. Not everybody has that opportunity, but I did, and for me, it was very telling about the bullets flying in the startup, from each other. So this is a good conversation, Sam. I really appreciate it. How about the benefits and the challenges as a person, as an individual? Just the benefits and the challenges, maybe beyond the financial side. Sure. Of working for a startup. I mean, you alluded to one of them because I already wrote that quote down. Going to work for a startup is better than getting an MBA. I resonated real with me. What other benefits and or challenges do you see for people working for startups?
Certainly. So there are tons of great opportunities. That's probably, I think, the number one benefit. Going back to that quote from Bobby Unser, success is where preparation and opportunity meet. Yeah. The great thing is that startups are full of opportunities. Okay. Well-run startups have tons of them. In fact, you'll get more opportunities to do things that you probably can handle. But if you've done the preparation, most people I found is they just want a chance to play. You put Tom Brady in the game. I mean, he was a 6th-round draft choice. Kurt Warner was sitting behind, I forgot the quarterback's name. He was on the bench until the first string quarterback got injured, and then he went in, and he was a phenomenal quarterback. If you believe that could be you, then you may find a startup a good match in that area, because you'll have lots of opportunities to show that you can do some good work. Another would be growth and learning. When you're doing something new, you're doing something interesting, doing something that challenges you, you usually grow. Okay. You have an opportunity, and that's where the MBA side of this kind of comes in, where, man, it's great to learn it in the classroom, but to learn it in real life, that's real. Okay. The other thing I would say is that you usually have an opportunity to make a much bigger impact. At a large company, most people tend to be a small cog in a giant engine. Well, in a 5, 10, 20-man startup, 20-person startup, you're very important. Okay, even if you're the most junior person, the newest hire or whatever, you can make a huge impact. And if that's what you desire, their opportunities will be plentiful. And of course, that's the future upside, but we've kind of already talked about that. I would focus less on the future upside and focus more on the opportunities for growth and learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, quick question, and there may not be a good answer on this one, and that is, the old golden parachute kind of thing. And I get that if you're an executive in a company, but let's say I go to work for Sam Wong's startup company selling Sam coins, right?
Yes.
And Sam's trying to sell me on coming to work for him. And I say, Sam, look, I got a lot of irons in the fire. I like your idea. I like the idea of the stock options. I like this and that. But if this thing fails and it goes under, what are you going to do for me? Is it common? Does the potential employee have any leverage in terms of trying to get some kind of out package if things do fail?
It's very rare.
Is it rare?
Startups do not have those resources typically. And even if the startup wrote you some type of golden parachute, hey, you're a super senior person that in order to lure you away from where you're at, I'm going to give you all sorts of, some type of benefit. If the company's on the downhill and they're about to shutter the doors, they may have it written down that you're going to get that, but can they fulfill?
Where's it coming from?
Yeah.
That's what I call my cousin, like we talked about, and said, hey, come on over and pay this guy a visit, right? So no, we don't encourage that. Just don't write cards and letters to Teddy. So.
Yeah.
But I'm always curious because there's this risk reward, and it's the entrepreneur that's putting the capital together on this thing. The risk is there, but there's also a risk, as we've talked for this hour about, okay, well, what if I'm the potential employee? And are there any safeguards? I guess that's part of what I'm looking at if things don't work out. And it sounds like it's not really going to be very common to see that. So just go in with your eyes open. I guess that's your main thought here. Yeah.
Again, one of the startups I went to work for, they gave relocation package to 15 of us. They asked 15 of us to relocate. I opted not to, and I had the ability not to relocate. I traveled all the time, but about 10 people relocated. And then the company went bankrupt, shut down, and so these people are living in a new community. They don't know the businesses there because they were involved in the startup. They were head down, nose down the grindstone. They didn't get to know other organizations or people in the community. And that was a huge mistake. So that told me that if anybody's going to take a job offer, they better go, if they're going to relocate, they better do their due diligence to find what else is going on in that community to be ready in the event that it fails. Yeah.
Hey, just real quick, I know we've got a few minutes left before we move into the kind of the wrap up segment, but we do have a question from Lisa. She posed the question about your website. Does it discuss the different legal types, an LLC, for example, versus sole proprietorship, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, I do not have any content that talks about LLC versus sole proprietorship, partially because number one, that question is well answered from hundreds of other financial advisors. Okay. The second reason is that that's typically not a true startup question. It may be an entrepreneur question, but 99% of all startups should form as a Delaware C corporation. Okay. So and the definition of a typical startup is you're looking for outside funding to fuel your growth, and you're hoping to scale wildly, aggressively. And that usually means you need to get venture capital, angel investment, that type of thing. And most venture capitalists and angels, the professional ones, the seasoned ones, the ones who know what they're doing, if you're not a Delaware C corporation, they say, before I write you this check and you get to cash it, you're going to become a Delaware C corporation.
Yeah, I got to ask you, and you don't have to divulge the name of the company, but I'm sure you've had stories over the years of companies you've worked with, that even ones we may have heard of, and if you're at liberty to discuss, a success story or something, something that I can tangibly, I can say, yeah, wow, I wish I knew who they were back then. Anything you can share along those lines, just out of curiosity?
Sure. I know a lot of the things that we've talked about here have been kind of like all the risk and such.
Yeah.
There is reward Okay. That I was part of 3 companies that got acquired. Okay. And there's an upside to that. And it's great to be able to see. Startup number 4, I was the CEO, I was a first-time CEO. And that company did get acquired, and we benefited from that. That was nice. The startup number 5 was acquired as well, acquired by Cisco, $125 million. That's public info. And that company did not get a whole lot of outside investment, which meant that there was very little dilution. So a lot of that went to, the founders of the company. Okay.
Yeah.
I was not a founder, unfortunately. I was a late stage hire of that. So there's some nice opportunities out there, and you don't have to have this ridiculous unicorn sized exit, where you're ringing the bell on the NASDAQ. Okay. Hey, we IPO'd. The vast majority of startups will exit through an acquisition, not through an IPO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the company is successful, the acquisition is usually good for the founders and the employees. And if the founders do a good job, they're going to protect their employees and make sure the employees get paid, not just themselves.
Yeah, but Sam, only because my experiences, I've had a lot of positive and negative experiences about being involved in a startup. It's also that pay attention to the acquisition agreement, because sometimes an acquisition agreement does not favor the employees and or the employees who are investors. I've seen that happen where the principal, the major stockholder will sell that business off. It comes back to this: pay attention. Pay attention.
Yeah, so part of how can you figure that out? Because the average employee does not have, they're not going to say, hey, Teddy, you're my 100th hire this company, but we're looking at getting acquired. Here's the acquisition agreement. Let me show it to you. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm referring to mostly employees who go to a startup with some kind of investment. They get stock options or something like that. You got to pay attention to those types of transactions so you understand. So you, as much as you can, so you understand.
Yeah. So what I'd say, what you can do as an employee is look at the funding. Okay.
Yeah.
Dig into the funding round, because that's one of the biggest things that will affect your potential outcome.
Yeah.
So the typical startup goes through several rounds of funding. It goes through pre-seed, which is kind of like, hey, you're my dentist, you're my friend, you're my rich uncle, can you please fund me? And so that's all the early stage pre-seed. Then it gets to some type of seed round, which is maybe the first round where you get professional investors coming in to invest in you. You might, after that, if you continue to grow, you get a Series A round, then a Series B, Series C, and then continuing on through the letters of the alphabet. If a startup gets past the Series C funding round, either it's growing really, really healthy, like if they get a Series D, Series E, or Series F, either they're growing and phenomenally successful, or they're flat and they're just, they got enough to have potential, but they're not yet healthy. If the later rounds come in and the valuations for those rounds are not growing up, that means that the people who own stock or equity, the employees in the stock options, whatever, they will start to get over diluted, or in some cases even washed out. Meaning, if there's a down round, like Series C, I raised $50 million at a $250 million pre-money valuation. Okay, so 250 million is what the investors agreed that the startup was worth. That determines what's big of a slice of a pie. But the Series D comes in, they raise 100 million at the same $250 million valuation. That's usually a bad sign. The next round valuation needs to be 3 times higher or so, or whatever else, for anybody to potentially see the value of their stock actually be healthy and growing.
Cool. Sam, this is good stuff. I mean, it's our economy grows and our economy thrives on new organizations starting up. I mean, it's a huge part of our economy, and it's a huge benefit to all those who are involved in lots of ways. So understanding some of this can be very helpful. So thanks a lot for showing up today and sharing with us. I really do appreciate it. Randy, we got 5 minutes left. I got a story. Do you have a story?
Just a short observation. And And I joke with people. I say, you don't want me to do your taxes or represent you in court. So I'm sitting there a little bit like a deer in the headlight look as you're going through some of the values of stock, and you're using lingo that I don't use on a daily basis. So my thought here is to seek help where you need help. And if you have the idea, and we all have ideas, and Teddy's got idea, I've got idea, everybody's had an idea of the better mousetrap. And one of the mistakes of many in my life that I made, I had the idea, but I didn't really think it through and get enough consultation from outside sources to see, is this thing real? Mm-hmm. How can we take this to market and be sustainable? And I don't know that there was a good answer to how that could all work out. All I know is at the end, it fell apart. Now I learned a lot, but my point goes back to saying I should have sought out people like you and others who have expertise in areas aside from my area of expertise. So if you have ideas for a business, don't go it alone. Mm-hmm. Reach out to other people. And sometimes investing in somebody like Sam or others who've been down this path and can guide you can be a huge benefit to you versus, hey, beat my chest. I don't need anybody else. I get this idea. I'm going to hit the market and I'm going to be the next Mark Cuban or whatever. That the unicorn thing may not happen. So anyway, I'll leave it to you, Teddy, to take us on out of here. But just again, seek help where you can and listen to it.
Yeah, be coachable.
And listen to it.
Be coachable.
Don't be hard-headed. And I think that's a mistake many have made, including me over time, I think. Yeah.
Me too. More often than I care to admit to, and I'm going to piggyback off that idea, Randy. Yeah. Seek support, seek ideas, seek knowledge. Don't go at either starting a startup or going to work a startup without having knowledge. And the more knowledge you can have about what's going on, what's the upside, what's the risk, the better off you're going to be. One of the things that I heard this said even earlier this morning: spend some dollars to save some dollars. Spend some dollars to make better dollars. And what that means in the context of what Randy said is, if you have to pay for guidance and coaching and support and, consulting, so you make good, logical decisions, and spend some dollars to do that. Sure. Rather than go, oh man, I watched Shark Tank. Oh man, I read, Grow Rich, whatever. I got this. No, Teddy, you don't. I'm not my dentist. I'm not my, financial planner and, all that stuff. I'm not my CPA. I have people who do that for me with my $16 million portfolio that I have in my mind. So anyway, get help is the most important thing to say. Sure. Hey, next week, Sam, again, thanks a lot, buddy. I really appreciate you coming in and joining us today. Next week, we got Les Fenves, Fenvyves, Les Fenves. And I always mess his name up, Fenvyves. Sam is going to come and have a conversation with us about how to sell yourself in an interview. Sell yourself interview. Sam, Les does, he teaches interviewing skills and resume writing skills. This is the salt of the earth conversations about job search, the core things that we said we're going to bring back to you about job search. To help you with those core things. So Les has got a long experience in high-tech search and sales management, and great guy, senior recruiter for previous companies for 30 years. Be a great conversation with Les. So check us out on the ncwiseman.com to see what else is going on. Be ready, because we're going to start sharing more through LinkedIn articles. We're going to create a LinkedIn newsletter. Randy, I got to tell you about that. The door got opened up today for that. We're going to start giving you guys more insights to who our speakers are, so that you're more attuned about who to come see and who to listen to. Mm-hmm. So, Sam, again, thanks a lot. Thanks, Randy, Sam. Anything else?
No, just again, this is a lunch and learn where we get to pick the topic and we get to help guide the conversation. So I tell you, Teddy, speaking for myself anyway, I always learn something. And certainly today with Sam, I learned a lot. I'm not sure how much of this I'm going to be able to remember, but I was writing things down. Good so stuff. Sam, again, appreciate you. Appreciate it. Have a great day, folks.
All right. Awesome. See you later. Bye-bye.
Good luck. Yeah. Best of luck.